Does God know the future? If yes, why did he create Adam knowing he would sin? So this is a two-part question. Does God know the future is the first part here. And the answer to this very simply is yes, God does know the future. It seems to be the case that's what we mean when we say that God is all-knowing. That includes all the things in the future that will actually happen. As a matter of fact, if you tend to lean towards a moleness perspective, you would also say that God knows all the possible things that could have happened. I think that's just commonsensical. I don't necessarily think you need to be a moleness to believe that. It seems to be the case that God not only knows the actual future that will happen, but he also knows what could possibly have been the case if certain things were to be, or if certain scenarios were to be presented. If yes, why did God create Adam knowing that he would sin? Now, this is a more difficult question. The assumption here is that we somehow know what God's ultimate purpose is. When we talk about him knowing Adam was going to sin, why did he do it? Why wouldn't he do it is my question. Maybe the rebuttal here comes to something like, well, that would mean people would go to hell. Correct. Yeah. And I would say people would freely go to hell anyways, because they would sin and they would rebel against God, and it's still their doing. I think the reason why God created the world, knowing that Adam and Eve would sin, is because I think it was only in those conditions, sin and evil in the world, where we would truly know God for who he is. And by that I mean that God is by nature and essentially redemptive and merciful and loving. And the only way we would know that experientially was if there was sin in the world. If there was no sin in the world, if God created the world without any choices, not only would we not know God experientially for being redemptive and loving and caring and all those good things, we, as a matter of fact, wouldn't even have the ability to choose to love God. And that seems to be problematic in regards to what we would consider authentic love. The power kind of love is that you decide to love and then you allow someone to love you. Without that, if that's taken away, it would be very difficult, it seems to me at least, to call whatever that thing is love. Again, one of the examples that I give is, because we have computers and robots essentially, is like if my phone said I love you. Well, that's not love. That's very different, because it's programmed to say that. That's very different than if my child said I love you. If my son came to me and hugged me and said I love you, which he did this morning, that means an infinite amount more than if my phone were to tell me that it loves me. Partly because my son is deciding to say, he is willing to say that he loved me. And I would say it's the same situation when it comes to us and God. God wanted a world in which we willed to love him. I think this gets miscommunicated quite a bit with Christians. I think God's ultimate purpose was to create a world in which people know him for who he is.